This video is an overview of the hypothalamus and pituitary gland and presents information on the functioning of the posterior pituitary. The pituitary gland is shown here. It sits in a protected pocket of bone, shown here, and it's connected to the brain via a thin stalk. The infundibulum is the name of the stalk that connects the pituitary gland to the brain. The anterior pituitary gland, shown here, is a true endocrine gland of epithelial origin. The posterior pituitary, on the other hand, shown here, is actually an extension of neural tissue. So overall, the posterior pituitary is an extension of the brain that secretes neurohormones made in the hypothalamus. The posterior pituitary secretes two neurohormones, antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. So they're both synthesized in neurons that sit within the hypothalamus. For the purpose of this diagram, only one neuron is shown, but it's important to remember that there would be many neurons extending from the hypothalamus down into the posterior pituitary gland. And there are specialized neurons that produce oxytocin and other specialized neurons that produce antidiuretic hormone. What you can see here is the cell body of the neuron, and this is the axon extending all the way down into the posterior pituitary. The circular red structures represent neurohormone, and this is showing the neurohormone enclosed within a vesicle. The hormone that's produced in the cell bodies of the neurons are transported down the axon to the terminal portion of the axon, and it's here that they're released. So let's take a closer look at how these neurons function. When there's a stimulus to these neurons located in the hypothalamus, action potentials travel down the axon, and this triggers the secretion of the neurohormone that's stored in the axon terminal. Those neurohormones are secreted into the circulation, where they then travel to target tissues. As mentioned previously, the two neurohormones released from the posterior pituitary are oxytocin and vasopressin. And these diagrams show that both of these hormones are made up of just a few amino acids. Oxytocin is important for controlling ejection of milk during breastfeeding and uterine contractions during labour and delivery. And it is important to note that secretion of oxytocin is controlled by positive feedback mechanisms. Most hormone secretions are controlled by negative feedback mechanisms. So this means that oxytocin, once secreted, will trigger a positive feedback loop where more hormone is secreted. And what stops secretion of the hormone is either when the baby stops suckling during breastfeeding or after the birth of a baby. Antidiuretic hormone, or vasopressin, acts on the kidneys to regulate water balance, and its secretion is controlled by negative feedback.